Okay, we want to talk about directional lights within Vizrt T5. We're going to go ahead and open up our scene here that we created earlier in our 3D environment so that we can light it. Now, if you saw the general overview of lights, we real quickly set up one light to cast some shadows. This time we got a couple of extra elements within our scene here. Let's review number one. We have within our environment here with our asset placement, we have our intensity here. We'll set that to roughly 50-60%. We have everything textured with our PBR materials. We have our floor, our wall. We just need to start lighting. We have our default lighting is off. So now we're going to add a directional light, and we're going to go ahead and add a group by clicking or dragging. We can call this directional light if you want. We're going to come down into our container plugins and we're going to search for our light. I'm just going to type in light down here in our search box. It comes up with the light V4. We're going to drag that onto our container here. We're going to click on our light icon and we're going to go into the light editor. Now we're going to change our light to directional. And underneath the directional light, we have number one, a color selection. It's white by default. If we want to change it to any color we want, we can. Green, for example. If we want to change it, we just select our color wheel and then come into the color box and drag the little icon around. We also have options for RGB, a hex. We can choose it down here with our color wheel or sliders. We have a saturation, a value. We also have a picker so that you can come around and pick any color that you want. If we just want to leave it as white at the general default color, we can. Just be aware that you change the color, it's going to change the color of your scene depending on what that light is lighting. Okay, we're just going to leave it at white. We also have an intensity setting. We can take that down to 0. We can take that all the way up past 100% if you needed to increase the intensity of that particular light. We have a diffuse intensity. Again, we can take that up past 100% or down to 0. A specular intensity for the directional light as well. So now we can increase the specular intensity of that. Notice anytime you make a change on the light, the color changes here to blue. If you just want to get it back to the default, you just double click on it. That changes it back to the default value and no longer is the text blue. Now for every light we have a shadow setting. And if we want to use the shadows within our scene, we need to enable shadows within every light. Once you do that, you also have your offset value, offset units, cascades, 1 through 4 that we can choose, and a split lambda. So these are all shadow settings that increase or decrease the aesthetics of the shadow. Now within our scene, notice we don't see much happening here yet. Our directional lights, also known as distance lights, are lights that shine into a parallel direction. And that means all rays are present everywhere within your scene and there is no fall off at any time. In the real world, directional lights would not exist. However, in VizWorld, they're mainly used to simulate strong light sources far away, emitting all objects. An example of this would be the sun, and you would probably only use one distant light within your scene, which would be responsible for a global scene-wide light. Now, directional lights are only controlled by an object's container rotation. So as you can see here, when we are rotating this light, how it's affecting it. If we were to move the position, either on the Y, on the X, or forward and backward in Z space, it is not going to affect anything within the scene. Directional lights only work with the rotation. And now that we are rotating it, you can see that we have some shadows here. So if you don't see shadows within your scene, what we need to do is to set it up. So first, what you need to do is find the caster and receiver plugin. And since I want the cogwheel to cast a shadow upon the floor, I would just need to drag a caster upon the cogwheel. Now, when we do that, you can see that slight shadow showed up, and this is when you can come in and start adjusting your additional settings so that your shadows may show up a little bit better. As you rotate the light, you'll see the shadows, and whether that is being affected by the intensity of the light, the intensity of your environment, or the intensity of the alpha of the shadows, you can adjust all of those settings to get it where you need be. So in case of this cannon, which has many groups, within it, you can actually just use a caster and receiver on the topmost group, and that will affect that, which will save you time and performance rather than dragging a caster / receiver on every individual container. If I just take the caster and drag it on that cannon, you can now see the shadow there. We don't have anything on the text, so again, we would need to drag a caster on the text for a shadow to show up, and once you have it on there, it would be about rotating your light within the scene. So that's what the directional light is within Vizrt T5.